Alright, so I'm just gonna be doing some mic brushing, and I do have another story to tell. And if you have watched the previous mic scratching and story time video, then you'll know about my good friend Carson. Now, if you haven't watched it, I was talking about how he was helping me combat the copious amounts of alcohol I had in my body. To be fair, it wasn't that much, but the circumstances made it worse. Alright. So, this was during burn camp, and I was mainly dishwashing at that time. And he was sort of on and off. Sometimes he'd wash. But I think that day, I was definitely washing. I don't know if he was. He might have. But, it was towards the afternoon, I think. And it was the last two periods, which go from, I have no idea about the exact times, but I do know that we did have quite a long break because we would just get scheduled to clean stuff, and it didn't really take that long to clean stuff, like the bathroom or just checking up on things. And so, once we got done, you basically had a free period. And we decided to go on a little creek hike. Now, there is a pretty nice creek actually. It also connects to the Black River, that is the name of the river, but it connects to that river. And, well, if you walk the right path, it leads to the river. But that's only like 2 minutes. But if you walk towards the left side of the creek, then it goes like way deeper, and it's like a half an hour hike, I'd say. But we had never gone all the way to the left. We'd always just explore a little, and then usually we'd go back. So we didn't really know where it ended. We can only guesstimate. But that day, we thought, let's go all the way. And so that's what we did. I don't think we packed anything because we knew it wasn't, like, how far could it be, right? So we started off, and we were just walking, and there's a lot of shrubs. Well, like, on the side of the creek, there's a lot of shrubs. The creek itself isn't really deep. Maybe like it never really got knee deep. Only like to your shins, I'd say. But there are like some properties, and there are also some cows which we saw. And those cows were chilling. They're just eating grass, you know. They're staring at us, probably thinking, what fools we were. But yeah, definitely love the cows. In the beginning, it was more like creaky, and then after about 10 minutes or so, maybe like 15, you get to like a road which would cross the creek. But after that, it would be sort of like a dried out creek where there are only like stones. And there's also a little barbed wire, but it wasn't really like properly propped up. Like you could easily pass it. So that's what we did. And after that, it got a little more wet again. Until we got to like an area where there are a lot more like shrubs. And so on our first attempt, we decided to back up and we went back without exploring the entirety of the creek. But then the next day or so, I was like, well, if there's like shrubs, how about we use something to cut them? And one of our good friends, he had bought a machete from the flea market. And we used that to cut the shrubs, which worked pretty well. But there's one problem with it, is the handle was kind of broken. There's only like half the handle. I don't know what happened, but there's only half the handle. So I was thinking, it's really uncomfortable to use it without a handle. So I wrapped my t-shirt around it, and that worked pretty well. So the second time around, we went down the creek and I just started chopping, like making a little path. And it was only about like 10 to 15 minutes until you hit another road. And this time around, that road looked quite familiar. Because other than camp itself, there's another building that we call the schoolhouse. And the schoolhouse, it used to belong to the camp owner's parents. And so it's a very old building. It's got a pretty big yard. It's got 4 rooms and a bathroom. And I think that's about it. It also has a shed. But it's pretty cozy, I gotta say. And so, if you're on an off day or whatever, you'd go there and not bother the people who are at camp. And so, we sort of knew that the creek would lead there because, there's not really a whole lot of different options for it to end. So we went up to the schoolhouse and we said hi to the people who were there. start like very early in the day. So they get up at like 6:30 or whatever and take care of all the horses and get them ready for horseback riding. And so we said hi to them, had a little break, and then we decided to head back. And on our way back, Carson spotted this little overhang, but you had to like climb up a hill, which was quite steep, and there's like a little deer path, which you could follow, or I forget the name, but something like that. And so we climbed up there, and it was quite nice. And then, for some reason, we were like, on our way back to camp, we were about like 10 minutes away, and you could see through the treetops like some birds flying, and there might have been like some exotic ones too in there. But Carson made a call where he was like, we were just like talking, and he was like, wow, I really enjoyed this creek hike so much. And you know what would really make this creek hike that much more special? And I was like, what, Carson, tell me? And he was like, what if we saw a bald eagle? I think he got the idea because we were like watching these birds fly around. And I was like, yeah, man, I don't think I'd ever seen a bald eagle. And I mean, it's like the American animal, right? And so I was like, that would be quite impressive, but it's highly unlikely. And what do you know? As soon as he said that, he spotted a bald eagle. And it was just sitting on a treetop, on like a branch, gazing the horizon. And he was like freaking out and telling me that he had seen it. And I couldn't believe my eyes either. And we were watching it, and then it took off. It spread its wings, and it just flew. And I gotta say, it was such a magical moment, especially because he kind of, he kind of called it, and that made it that much more special. And ever since then, I think I've been starting to look like up a lot more, like not only in nature but also in the city, because I feel like you can miss a lot of things if your gaze is always just on eye level. There's so much more that is a little higher, but also just like sometimes I'd just be walking through the city and my gaze would be like somewhere completely different, right? sometimes some hilarious moments happen where I'd be looking at like the top floors of a building and I'd spot somebody looking down, and I'd always imagine how it must feel for them because they're looking down and they've probably never encountered a person walking by and just looking up, right? And so I feel like that's always like a special moment. I always have to smile after that because I'm like, that's kind of weird, but at the same time, it's also like kind of special, because it's something that they didn't expect and you didn't expect either, but it just kind of happened. I also, on the topic of, making eye contact, to this day, I still remember this one guy. Sadly, I don't know how old I was. Probably around 13, 14. And it was on a holiday where we went to Greece. And we were walking down the city. And I was just looking around, and suddenly I made eye contact with like an older fella, probably around 45 plus. He had long hair, which he had tied up in a ponytail, and he was drinking something, and I kind of stopped and looked at him for a second, and he looked at me back, and he just smiled, and I don't know what it is, but if you're making like eye contact with someone and you smile at them, there's a good chance that they're not gonna smile back. Not because they don't want to, or it wasn't really their intention to, but because it's so uncommon nowadays to one, make eye contact, and two, like, just have like a bright smile on your face. At least that's what I feel like. And so that guy really stood out to me, and to this day, probably almost a decade later, and I still think about him because he did make my day a lot better, especially on that one, because I was kind of like lost in thought, and I made eye contact with him, and he just smiled, like for no reason, And I think that can be a very special moment, because it's a stranger, and I mean, they're just spreading positivity unconditionally, right? I think that's very valuable. If you're paying close attention, you can also tell that there's a bald eagle on my shirt, which isn't necessarily coincidence. If you'd like to save my life, you can do that by subscribing. But other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you take care of yourself, you stay safe, and I'll see you very, very soon, alright? Love you.